the gap is the problem, and the problem is what we're trying to solve. So in terms of the program that UNO School, or UNO Institute is offering to its clients, problem definition is very important. Therefore, we try to make it a bit neater, a bit more to the point, and a bit easier to understand. So in the first half today, I will try to recap the gap, and then we're going to focus on how we're going to resolve this. So the gaps is basically when you go through it step by step, you will realize why it's so hard for Japanese people to communicate with European people and vice versa. The reason for this is that actually there are many gaps in communication, in understanding, in thinking, and we wrote down the highlights. So first of all, when you look at the culture of Europe, basically Europe is a melting pot, and we have always been, historically speaking, full of conflict, war, and not only country to country, people to people. We have different backgrounds, and we had to coexist, and that was not always peacefully. And we had many difficulties communicating with each other. So this continent was always in conflict. On the other side, you have Japan, which was always stable, and which has an implicit culture because basically people share the same values, the same cultural background. They have a common sense, an implicit culture, and it's very easy to be on the same page. So less communication is required. Less conflict, less communication is necessary. People understand each other instinctively. Now, that means that, for example, in terms of European communication style, we try to be very explicit. We really try to share with others what's on our mind, because we cannot assume that the other side will understand us, because there are so much diversity within Europe. On the other hand, Japanese people understand each other without expressing themselves. So when you are communicating with each other, the Western side might insist on bringing everything on the table, while the Japanese side might be a little bit uncomfortable with that. Second point, we are actually in Europe, we are trying to find the truth in yourself. What does that mean? The truth in yourself means that we actually depend on our own judgment, on our own reasoning, our own critical thinking skills when we are judging new information. And that means that basically we are the ones who find the truth. If we get new information, we have a tendency to be skeptical and think, really? Does that fit in the information that I already have? Does it fit in my view of the world? And they try to give it a place in their mental framework. But the key here is that we are exercising a critical filter with all the new information that comes in, that people share with us. On the other hand, Japanese culture.
Try to confirm, find the truth means self-decision making.
Self-decision making, not only that, but also self-decision making. You have a responsibility to
your judgment.
Not just right. So to basically test the information that you get. So in United States, Trump always says fake news. So every news item he gets, he's very skeptical. But that's not the case. Yuva also joined. Good morning, Yuva.
Okay.
おはようございます。
おはようございます。すごいペラペラ日本語で。じ
What
ゃあ、これか
time?
ら日本語で続けましょう。
What time did you go to bed last night? Eva.
What is it?
What time did you go to bed last night?
Around 12 p.m.
12 p.m. Oh,
Oh,
you could.
12 a.m.
Huh?
12 a.m.
12 a.m. So midnight.
Oh,
Yeah,
midnight.
midnight.
Okay, I thought you were going to bed 2 a.m. Okay, it's better. Go ahead. Okay, let's continue.
So, welcome in Japan. Today is Uno-san's birthday.
Yeah, my birthday. Yeah.
Many happy.
So why do we have problems? The first bullet point. So basically, I will compare left and right. Right. So the first bullet point reads melting pot, full of conflict, difficult to communicate. That means that actually in Europe, on the left-hand side, that's the European situation. So in Europe, the European continent is a melting pot. There are many different countries, many different cultures, many different languages. And looking at the history of Europe, it's filled with conflict, filled with war, because people were trying to sustain themselves or expand their territory or moving from one place to the other. And that has led to a lot of conflicts because people have different interests. And we had many difficulties to communicate because of the language barrier, because of conflict that existed. So that has led to a culture where we want to be very explicit in what we mean. So we want to make everything, we want to put everything on the table, and everything needs to be very, very clear and outspoken. It's an outspoken culture. We want to make everything debatable, everything needs to be discussed, everything needs to be mentioned, basically, because we do not instinctively understand what the other side is thinking. Therefore, we make everything discussable. On the other side, then you see that the first bullet point is the Japanese side. It reads stability, implicit shared culture, and common sense. So Japan has been is an island and has been an island with basically a monoculture. In Japan, 98.5% of people currently living in Japan are Japanese, and basically that was even higher in the past. So they have been isolated for a long time. That means that actually, because there was less conflict, because we all have the same background, we have also a common understanding. So it's not necessary to express yourself because we kind of understand each other here without using words. We call it reading the air. In Japan, people can read the air. We can understand without even talking. We can understand what the other side means and what is common sense and what is normal in the situation and what kind of social rules there are. So it's not necessary to put everything on the table. But if those two people from those two cultures, from a European person and the Japanese person, are going to communicate, they will have difficulties because the European will insist on making everything discussable and mentioning everything and putting everything in a contract. Whereas the Japanese person will understand that, okay, so if we're going to do business together, that means this, and that. But they don't need to put it in a contract because they know from each other, based on their common understanding, because based on their shared cultural background, what is expected from this business relationship. So that is the first communication gap between Europe and Japan. Now, the second communication gap on the left-hand side, it reads, find the truth in yourself. What does that mean? Basically, Europeans are kind of skeptical. We are based on our cultural background. European philosophy is based on analytical, critical thinking. So that means that we question all the information that we receive, all new information that we get, we have a question mark. Like, really? Is that really true? Does that fit into my ideas? Does that fit in the information that I already have? And if it doesn't fit, the discussion will start between people. Like, okay, but you say this, but according to this information, it doesn't really make sense. So, and this is part of our culture. So every individual is responsible to designing his own worldview and looking very critical at the information that you get in order to see whether it fits. Because you cannot be certain that the information that other people give you is actually true. People could be lying, and because of the previous point, because of the conflict, etc., there is quite a big risk that people are actually lying and not telling you the truth because they have certain interests that do not match yours. So people in Europe try to find the truth in themselves. On the other side, on the Japanese side, we can see that actually there is a lot of respect for parents. There is a lot of respect for your seniors, and Japanese people are being taught to listen to their parents, to listen to their seniors, to listen to the rules, the written and unwritten rules in society, and follow those. So instead of questioning everything, they learn the information that people with more experience have, and they make it their own, and based on that they grow their understanding of how things are. So that is there are less questions about the information that they get, and people more inclined towards following. So that's the second gap between Europe and Japan. The third one is actually that if we have a communication in Europe, and it's a complex communication about a complex idea, like a big project, for example, a very big project with many people and a lot of different technology, things that we haven't done before, and a lot of money involved, very complex. The way the Europeans will communicate will be aimed to go up. That means that basically what we will try to do is we will try to simplify, so that I don't know if you know the term, the 50,000 feet view, or I don't know exactly how many, 10,000 feet view is the expression. Basically, it looks like if you look down from an airplane to the ground, it looks kind of simple. But it's because you kind of miss the details. So what we try to do is we try to get the 10,000 foot view to simplify the project and try to make a model out of everything. So people are very much inclined to walk to a whiteboard and start to write down some cubes and arrows and try to kind of make sense out of it all. So to see whether we have the same understanding. And then later on, we will zoom in on the details. So the first step is simplify, and then later on, we look at the details. So for any complex situation, what will happen is that step one, Europeans will try to simplify. Step two, they will create an agenda to fill in all the blanks that are in the model. So if the model has 3 squares and 3 arrows, the agenda will probably be square 1, square 2, square 3, and we just need to fill in the details. After we've done that, we basically have solved the difficulty. We can create a project plan, and based on that, we can continue. Now in Japan, if there is a very complex project, the same project, there is, instead of the tendency to go up, there's a tendency to go down, to actually look at the problem in detail already before we have established this model. So without simplifying, focus on details, to look at every element in this project and to see, okay, but what about this? What about that? Not necessarily in a chronological order, but look at the complex reality without making it simple, but going down and drilling into details to maintain all the complexity, but by looking at all the individual details, getting a better understanding, not necessarily going from left to right, but going from left to right to middle and back and forth until we have a good understanding of the complex reality. Now, if these two people meet, for example, in a negotiation, and they are talking about this complex project, then actually, while they may end up, they may start here, they will actually move in different directions to get a grasp of the reality, the complexities of the project. Now, that is the third complex factor when it comes to communication between Europeans and Japanese. Moving on to the fourth point, risk, change, and reward on the European side versus conservative and improvement. Europeans and actually even more Americans, they're all about risk taking, about change, embracing change. And people who do that, the people who take a risk, entrepreneurs, they are being rewarded. So if you take a risk and if you succeed, then you're being rewarded. If you fail, you will not be punished. Actually, it's a kind of common understanding that it is a good idea if you want to improve, if you want to create change, then it's a good idea that you fail fast. So the objective is actually not to fail. The objective is to fail quickly, because if you fail quickly, you will learn faster and you will avoid making the mistake of pursuing something into detail and then later on discovering, after you make all these investments, that it doesn't work. So the objective is actually to fail and to fail fast. But if you do this, if you take risk, if you are willing to change, then you can become rich. On the other side, in Japan, failure is not actually
By the way, European people, they don't have any punishment in the case of failed?
No.
No?
No. Of course, like if you fail because of stupidity, that's different from failing by design. So if you tried something and you make the same mistake twice or three times, then people are not generous. But if you fail by design because you tried something and it failed quickly, I mean, basically, if you fail but without doing due diligence, because if you could have already through a different approach could have learned this much earlier in the process, then people are not so generous. Or if you fail smart, then people are prepared to forgive you easily. If people in Europe, they can go bankrupt, which is, of course, it's painful for everyone, and it's not. It doesn't really look that good on your resume. But on the other hand, you will be forgiven, and you will get a second chance to start a new business and to try all over again. It's not like you're tainted for life. In Japan, I think there is much less forgiveness for people who go through a bankruptcy.
Punishment.
Yeah. Punishment. So this in Japan, people tend to also change, but in a different way, not by making mistakes, but changing gradually, step by step, improving little by little. There is it's called, in Japan, it's called Kaizen. It's the constant attitude to improve your processes, to become even better, to bring up your quality, to reduce your costs, to make the processes even smoother. And this leads to a constant improvement of the output. But it's not about failure. It's about trying not to fail, but trying to improve constantly. So this risk-taking, going on a limb, trying something out, throwing things at a board and see what sticks, That's the European approach. If you go for a project together, usually I think there is a 9 out of 10 European companies will suggest to the Japanese partner, why don't we just start a pilot project? Just let's try and see how this goes. Let's try a pilot project. In Japan, I think there will be a lot of reservations against this. I say no. Let's not start business unless we have thoroughly analyzed everything in detail and we want to be successful. All right, the sixth. We are at the fifth point. Individualism and diversity. Individualism is key in European culture, in European way of thinking. I comes first. It's all about me. That's the central unit from which people think. I need this. I want that. I do this. It's all about me. Like these individuals, there's also a lot of diversity between people. I already mentioned this on point number one. We have different cultures, but even within a culture, like for example in Europe, in the Netherlands where I'm from, 20% of the people in the Netherlands, they have not been born in the Netherlands. They come from other countries. So there's a lot of diversity, and also among people that live in the Netherlands, people can be eccentric. They can be different from others. They can behave a little bit different from others. And because we are so much used to people having the right to express themselves, that we are not so critical. On the school ground, if kids are a little bit different, dress a little bit different, talk different, we don't care so much because they are free to do whatever they want. That's our basic attitude. Actually, that's the foundation of our culture. That's the foundation of our country. The reason why the Netherlands was founded, because we revolted against Spain, who tried to put their culture upon us. And the Netherlands was never a country before because we didn't have enough motivation to work together. But once we were oppressed by the people in Spain, the only thing that united the different little countries within the Netherlands was that we all wanted to be free and independent. And that became Article 1 of our Constitution. So that's part of European culture, individualism and diversity and freedom for everyone. On the other hand, behind Uno-san's control panel, we have uniformity. I tried to read behind your.
Okay. Sorry.
Uniformity and cooperation. So that's point number 5. So in Japan, there is more of a tendency to be uniform. Well, you will probably see that if you step into the train, people dress kind of the same way. They feel comfortable. They cooperate. They try to contribute to the community. It's not me. It's us. It's the company that comes first. It's the family that comes first. They don't necessarily feel that the individual is the central actor in society. It's the company, or it depends a little bit on where you are. It's the city where you live. It's the province where you live. That determines, that defines you. And you can even see that when people have this business card, right? The Japanese business card always has the company name big and then the individual small. In Europe, it's the other way around. So we have the individual first and then the company. Now, that seems to be not such a big difference, but when you start to negotiate with a European company, you realize that the European will try to seek a personal agreement. So he will really try to establish whether you are a reliable person, whether you are the one to do business with. We are always being taught to do business with decision makers, with people who make a personal commitment. So if I am negotiating, I want to make sure that if I make concessions, I can get concessions out of you. If you cannot make any decisions, if you cannot be responsible, who am I going to call if business goes bad? So the European will not feel very comfortable doing business with somebody who doesn't take this responsibility. And this is where a Japanese representative will always look at the company and will try to get approval from head office back in Japan. So that will also create, that's also a gap that you need to overcome when you're trying to communicate with these different cultures. The sixth point, top down versus bottom up. Top down is a European attitude where basically the boss decides. Ultimately, the boss is the boss, and therefore the boss defines the vision of the company and decides where we go. So basically, that is against the Japanese style of management. In Japan, there is a system of seniority and there is a system of conformity. That means that in Japan there is a tendency to have pre-meetings. There are the different department heads and above that management level. And basically, decisions come from bottom up. The really powerful people in Japan do not make decisions. The really powerful people do not have to make decisions. They look left, they look right, and if both sides are nodding, then they will say, okay, let's go ahead. If they say no, then probably they will not do it. So that is a different way of making decisions, a different way the system works. Does this make sense to you, Yuva, actually? If you have questions, please ask them. Right? Okay. Then number 7, Europeans, and again, Americans are even more extreme in this respect, are very impatient. We tend to think in quarters. That means that we need to report shareholder value. We need to make our targets every 3 months. Otherwise, we are in trouble. That means that we don't have time to negotiate very long. That we don't have time to waste in the European perspective. We want to have a contract. We want to have results within 3 months, preferably. So that means that we don't have time to spend a long time to get to know each other, to build trust and everything. So things need to move forward, need to move fast. And we tend to also lose our patience quickly if we don't follow an agenda, if we don't make any progress, if we are zooming in on details after details, going left and right, we lose our patience. And on the other hand, the Japanese tend to be much more patient and say, okay, well, since we don't want to make mistakes, we have to be patient. And if the risk is too high, we'd rather say no instead of trying to take a risk and say, okay, well, you know what, we can double our profit, but there is a 20% chance of failure. There's a big chance that the Japanese side will say no, and the European side will say, oh, well, let's do it. Let's make it a small project, but let's give it a try. And if the small project works out, then we will just follow up with a bigger project, and then At least let's get started. That's the attitude. So again, rushing, trying to rush the negotiations, trying to rush what you're doing versus tendency to say no. Again, that's a gap, that's a difficulty that you need to overcome when you're doing business with Europeans. Explicit and implicit, I think I already talked about that. Putting everything on the table, making everything explicit, putting everything in a contract, writing down exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to deliver, against which specifications, what you're going to do if there is a problem, already mitigate risks before you get started, and put everything in writing, everything. And once it's in writing, if there is a problem later on, you will just escalate it and make it into a court case, right? So that also diminishes the necessity to build trust, because basically what we trust is what's in the contract, and that's why you need to make it very explicit. In Japan, contracts tend to be much thinner. There's much less specification, because basically what the Japanese companies among each other agree on is that if you're going to supply your customer, that means that basically you need to follow them. You need to do whatever is necessary to make them successful. It's a kind of personal commitment. Without already knowing in detail what you're going to do, you're going to commit to help your customer. And that can go many ways. But that makes European companies very nervous, because but we haven't even established the scope. They don't want to start before there is a contract. In Japan, it's very common that people already start supplying their services or delivering products even before there is a contract. And that's because basically it's understood that we will always follow. Then the ninth point: Latin-based language versus Japanese language. Latin-based language means that actually Europeans among each other, they speak a different language, but at the bottom it's Latin. All these languages, all these different languages, whether it's German or whether it's French or Spanish or English, it all has its origin in Latin, which means that it's much easier to learn for a European, European to learn a European language than it is for a Japanese person. So that makes it difficult for a Japanese person to learn a European language. Plus, another thing is that if I notice that if I speak Japanese, or if I try to speak my own hetakuso Japanese, then also my personality changes a little bit. So that is another factor. It's cultural. So it's not only the language itself, just having a kind of infrastructure like a highway at which you exchange information, but it's also on top of that. There is also the cultural difference. So not speaking the language also means that you have less opportunity to be on the same cultural level. The next one is in Europe, we have a person-to-person relation. I mentioned this. So person-to-person means that there needs to be a personal commitment to the contract, not a business-to-business. No, I need to trust the other person. I need to respect him or her, and I need to be sure that if I'm going to pick up the phone later on during the project, that if there is a problem, that this person will feel personally responsible and will do everything in his or her power to make the project, to keep the project on track, to meet the commitments that were made during the negotiation. So that's why that's the European attitude. In Japan, it's more of an organization to organization understanding. So we as organizations, we are representatives of the organization, but it's more of the organization to organization level. For Europeans, that will feel very uncomfortable, because if the other side is not willing to take responsibility, then they will feel a little bit like, maybe I cannot trust this person, and they will not want to negotiate with them. Then self-confidence. Europeans, whether they feel self-confident or whether they are self-confident, they always try to project self-confidence. Self-confidence means strong. And in Japan, there is a tendency, especially towards Europeans, to feel a little bit inferior. And that's probably also because of the fact that we speak English quite easily, because of the same cultural background. The rules of engagement in Europe are based on critical thinking. That means that we try to we play our own game, and usually we're not so much aware of the Japanese game, but we only realize that the Japanese people cannot so easily pick up on our game. So when we are trying to make a model, for example, when we are at this level, we feel that, basically, why is this person, why can they not just get along with this, trying to simplify the reality? So we need to move on. They get impatient. They try to play their game, because that's the only game that they know. Right? We are not aware of the fact that people think different from us. And when people think different from us, we interpret that as people are not smart enough, or they cannot be trusted. They don't want to show their true intentions. So we try to, we will become a little bit suspicious as to whether the other side is capable enough or whether they can be trusted. So that is another gap that exists between Europeans and Japanese. So this is actually a rather big one. Finally, European common sense and Japanese common sense. I forgot about this one. We added this one.
This is we cannot find a shared issue for discussion. So
right.
If you're going to talk with European people, Japanese people, they do not know nothing about their issue. So Japanese, usually they read in Japanese newspaper, but European people read in English newspaper. But this is, the content is different. So this is a major issue we need to concern about, how to communicate with European people. Japanese cannot communicate with European people because of their common senses are different.
Their common sense is the Nikkei newspaper common sense, whereas the European common sense is the
That's like a good example is Luno, and how the European people go and judge for Gon, but the Japanese side is different. Because information base is different. Right?
Yeah, that's very different. The interpretation of what's happening in Japan versus the interpretation of the Gon case in Japan and outside Japan is very different. That would be a very good case study to actually apply to this, to make clear what we mean actually. This if we would keep two newspaper clippings next to each other, then it will become very, very clear what this means.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, this is a gap between Japan and Europe. So now you are moving to the 7 letters.
Okay. All right.
Everybody understand this gap among the Japan and Europe? Can you agree?
First, Yuva-san.
Or do you
Oh, you're
understand?
asking me? Sorry.
No problem.
No problem. Do you understand?
Yes, but I have a question actually.
Okay.
About the European actually. If a person, the European, he has two projects receiving from two different persons. For example, for one who can speak a fluent English but with less skill, and the other side poor English but very skillful person. So will the European person will be patient to listen to the poor English person, or he just encourage the person who can who's fluent in English? I just would like to know this.
Right. Okay. So I think so. Europe is a big continent. Well, it's not that big, but there are many different people within Europe. I think that especially, for example, in France, people will be very much more inclined to contract with the people who do not speak English very fluently, but are very skilled. Because in France they have a very big focus on intelligence is very important. The way that you reason, the way that you rhetoric, the content is very important. There is respect for intellect. So even though you don't speak English fluently, if they can establish that you are an intelligent person, that will weigh much more heavy than people who speak English fluently but actually do not have a lot of content. I'm not so sure about the Americans.
Okay.
I'm not so sure about the Americans.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Takai-san, what about you? Are you in agreement? Is this okay? Okay. Okay. All right. So looking at all these points here, I don't know how many there are. 3, 6, 9, 12 points. We can easily see that it's very difficult. There are a lot of levels at which there communication challenges exist, business challenges exist when you want to build a relationship with Europeans. So in order to bridge this gap, Uno Institute has designed a program to actually help individuals and organizations to overcome this gap, to try to get it closer, and then especially in this case, what we're talking about is a program designed for Japanese companies when they are doing business overseas. So, with having said that, do you have the pyramid in front of you, or shall I share my? Here we go. All right.
Okay, do you want to see item by item, but just only triangle is good enough for you?
I think that without the items, the triangle in itself doesn't mean that much. It needs to symbolize something.
Are you going to explain from the start? From the top?
No, I think basically it starts with the world is flat, but that's not so important. Basically, the start is there are a lot of communication and a lot of business challenges when you want to do business with Europeans. And so we have established that. So basically, then now we're going to look at the remedy, how we can bridge the gap that exists between the two, between Japan and the European continent. So the program in itself exists of a number of layers, and it depends on where you are as to how you can actually grow and develop yourself into a European counterpart, how to bridge the gap that exists. And first of all, at the bottom, looking at the bottom, that's the base layer. That's the basically the infrastructural layer that is based on just being able to communicate. So if you cannot speak any English, if you cannot like even poor English is okay as long as you communicate. So even with poor English, you will be able to make yourself understood, and you can do business with Europeans, but you need to have the tools at least to communicate. So English language is the base layer. And what does that mean? For example, if you want to do business as a Japanese company, if you want to outsource software development, you need to be able to at least communicate with your colleagues overseas. So that is, you need the infrastructure to do that. Therefore, we need to get we can help them and offer a program where we teach Japanese engineers to develop English vocabulary that will be sufficient to communicate with engineers in Malaysia, for example. Right. The next level, the level above that, is relate and engage. Relate and engage, what does that mean? Basically, what Uno-san mentioned as the final point, the 12th point, is that Japanese people find their information in the Nikkei Shimbun, but that's not the same reality. That's a different reality, a different view from what Europeans see. They have their own history, their own philosophy, their own culture, and they have their own current affairs, and they see that information, they get that information through their own news sources. So the second step, the level above the language level, is the relate and engage level. Being able to understand how people think and how you can get closer to them. In this program, we will look at a rough outline of European history, of European philosophy, that the Greek philosophers had European culture and current affairs, and we will teach the students where they can find the information, which news sources they can use in order to get on the same page, because Europe, as mentioned before, is a diverse continent with many different countries. So if you know a lot about Italian history, you don't know anything yet about Denmark. It's a completely different country with a different culture and a different background. So in this part, we will try to give you a view of the mind of a European. So what is on their mind? What are they thinking, and why are they thinking that? So you can get on the same page with your counterpart. So that's the next level. Then once we know the language and we kind of understand where people are coming from, we can help our clients to build skills. And skills start with presentation and persuasion skills. Very important if you want to do business with Europeans. You need to be persuasive. If you're not persuasive, if you are not willing to sell your ideas, to actually not only give people information, but to give them information in a way that appeals to their interests, that fits into their problem, and that solves their problem, they will not be willing to build up a relationship with you. So you will need, and that becomes the necessity to be persuasive becomes necessary. So the art of persuasion, the art to understand somebody's problem, the art to understand, to build up a logical argument that gives information that fits into the mindset of the European businessman, and then logically fits your solution with their problem, that will be necessary in order for you to even start to do business with them. So it's not just a matter of giving a presentation, just telling who you are and what you can do. No, it's much more important to find who are they, what is on their mind, what do they perceive to be their problem, and then how can I solve that problem? So that is what a presentation should be about, not just simple conveying information. It should be based on persuasion.
What is a major issue, or what is a major issue for persuasion for European people? One is logical. What about
it's
the other
logical.
issues? Yeah.
Right. But not only logical, because actually persuasiveness depends on logic, but also emotion. So you're not only, so for example, storytelling is a very persuasive way of presenting. If you tell a story, maybe even about yourself in Japan, you tell a story that people can relate to. That would say, because people have a tendency to always put everything in their own perspective, right? If you tell something about let's say your childhood, and let's say that you had a fight with your friends, that is something that is easily related to people. Will while you are talking about your friends, people think about themselves and how they had a fight with their friends, and that will be on their mind. So you might think that people are actually thinking about you, but while they are listening to you, oh yeah, I recognize that because I have that too. How often do you, when you are talking about the fact that you had a flu, you tell your friend that you had a flu, and then your friend immediately comes back to you and say, oh yeah, I had a flu too. But people always think about themselves first. So it's not only a logical argumentation. It also needs to be kind of like psychological about it, and realize that you need to not only have logical argumentation, but also emotional appeal. And you do that through storytelling, for example.
You said delivery technique. What is this?
Delivery technique. So basically, you can, when you deliver a presentation, you can stand behind a lectern and give your information. But a good speaker, a good presenter, realizes that actually people only listen to about 30% of what you have to say, and they much more influenced by how you present yourself, how you use your voice, how you use your body movement. That will make much more influence on them than what you're actually telling them. So delivery, the way that you deliver a presentation, the way you use your voice, the way you move around, the way you are actually looking directly into people's eyes and try to build that connection, try to build rapport, that will build trust. If you are constantly bent over your lectern and deliver your speech like this, you will not be able to sell anything.
Okay.
So this kind of persuasiveness, this kind of training is necessary if you actually want to reach people. Right. So then the next step is debate and persuasion. That's something that builds on the presentation skills, the persuasiveness that you need. Debate in Europe is something that we use to get closer to the truth. People who have different ideas, I already mentioned before that we have this critical thinking attitude. So whatever somebody tells us, we take with a grain of salt, and we try to see whether it fits into our worldview. and we may be skeptical, and we may reject the idea. But we use debates not to fight with each other, but to get closer to the truth. So debate is actually used to kind of test your own ideas and test the other person's ideas and see whose ideas are better. And a good debater will acknowledge that, okay, well, if you explain it that way, I can accept your ideas. So debate is an exercise in truth finding, in trying to share your worldview with the other side, and vice versa, with the objective to together get a common understanding. If you cannot engage in debate, it's very difficult to keep your interest in a negotiation, because the other side, if they are very good at debating and they are very persuasive, and you cannot put anything against the other side, that will reduce your influence in the negotiation, and that will probably give you a worse result. And what's even worse is that the other side might not respect you very much. So debate is the next level that is necessary if you want to do business with Europeans. Then on top of that, we will get to negotiation, and we can teach you how Europeans negotiate. There is not a one-size-fits-all, because culture will be important in negotiation. Like French people have a different style of negotiation than Italian people, for example, or Hungarian people. They have a completely different style. Dutch people, British people. You can and even that they are archetypes. There is a tendency for a German person when they negotiate, and the tendency for French people to negotiate. Negotiation in Europe is an art. It's something that is being taught, and it's very good to know how people prepare for a negotiation, what's on their mind, what they are thinking about. For example, Europeans will always try to find an alternative deal. So they will never go and negotiate with you without having an alternative, because they always want to be sure that the deal doesn't materialize. They can fall back to another deal. Another example, most of the Europeans, the more experienced negotiators, will try to negotiate incremental and then distributional. What does that mean? Basically, if you, in a negotiation, in the early stages of negotiation, you try to find what is important to the other side, and you try to find what is important for your side. And then you try to exchange what is not important for you for something that is important for you. So you give something that is not important to you but important to the other side, and exchange for something that is important for you but not important for the other side. If you do that, both sides can get more benefit. So that's how you can create more value in the negotiation. Then ultimately you come up with some kind of solution that will give both benefits. But then you try to get as much benefit from the table as possible. So negotiation will in the first stage of negotiation, it will be very collaborative and very much, okay, we are making progress. But then at the end, when all the value is on the table, people try to get as much off the table as possible on their side. So if you're not aware of this, if you don't know the rules of negotiation, there's a risk that basically you will not get very good results for your company. All right. Moving up, gaining trust.
Wait a minute. She does not know the BATNA.
I just explained. Well, basically, BATNA is the alternative. That's the deal that you will take if the deal that you're currently negotiating does not materialize. So if I'm interested in buying a car, right? I'm interested in buying a car, and I saw a very nice car at the local dealership. But before I go there, I'm going to look at other dealers and see, okay, so they have a similar car, and it's kind of similar, but the price is, let's say, it's $10,000. But the car is $10,000 at the other dealership. Now, you see the car in your local dealership, and you say, okay, well, basically, if I can't get a good price, if I can't get a good conditions like a car stereo or I don't know, some extra options, then I will not buy the car, because I know I will never pay more than $10,000, because I know that I can get it at the other dealer for that amount of money. So before you start negotiating, you always need to have an alternative. If you don't have an alternative, you don't know how low you can go. That's part of the preparation for a negotiation.
Okay, the other keyword is ZOPA.
Yeah, what was that again?
So, but now ZOPA is the most famous technique for negotiation.
Yeah, what was it?
Do you remember?
ZOPA? I forgot what it was. ZOPA. Yeah, I forgot what it was. But I don't think it's that important to understand, actually.
Okay, move on.
Well, let's see what it was. ZOPA. Strange. Is it with a Z? ZOPA.
Yeah, ZOPA. I will show you. Yes. You got it?
Zone of possible agreement. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, you got it?
Yeah, I got it. So basically, actually, it's what I described here, the zone of possible agreements. So basically, it is your minimum acceptable. Basically, people, when you go into negotiation, you have if you are a seller, then you want, like, for example, if I sell a car, I'm not prepared to let go of this car for less than $9,000, right? But actually, I'm secretly hoping to sell it for $12,000. Okay. Now, a buyer might come in and they feel that, oh, I want to buy this car. I'm not willing to pay more than $10,000, but I actually want to buy it for $8,000. Now, if you put these two together, you can see that the zone of negotiation, the ZOPA, the possible range is somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000. Basically, the minimum price that I want to have for the car and the maximum price the minimum price that I want to have for the car and what the other side is prepared to pay for the car. That's the ZOPA.
Okay.
It's very simple if it's only money, but actually it becomes a little bit more complex if there is, for example, if there are options at stake. Like, for example, how fast can I get the car? Does it have a stereo, yes or no? Do I get free tires with that, or free maintenance, or things like that? So then it becomes a little bit more complicated. But ZOPA is basically where you compare your maximum offer versus the other person's minimum offer. And if there is no ZOPA, there can never be a deal.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
So moving on, gaining trust. This is actually this is more where we come to the art of building bridges. So we have already a working infrastructure. We speak English. We know a little bit about the background about what's on the mind of our counterpart. We have the skills to persuade, to debate, and to negotiate with them. But then at the end of the day, that's when the most important time starts. When you stop working and you start to relax, you're going to have dinner together, and you're going to have drinks together. But what are you going to talk about? How are you going to engage with the other person? This is actually very challenging. This is where a lot of Japanese people do not enjoy to spend time after a long day of negotiation. They're tired. They want to go home. They want to go back to the hotel, and they want to sleep, or they want to relax and talk with other Japanese, and go to a sushi bar, for example, but not engage with the European. This is a very big missed opportunity, because this is actually where the most important part of negotiation takes place. So you have been negotiating all day. You have been talking about details. You have been kind of like a little bit frustrated, like, okay, I want this, but I can't get this done, and the other side. So this is where all the kind of professional frustrations are building up a little bit. Now, after the negotiation, when you are having dinner, you have a conversation, if you can kind of relax the atmosphere, this is where you can really do business, where people can kind of like look back a little bit and not focus on the details, but talk a little bit more about different things to take the tension out of the air. If you are not prepared to do this, it's very likely that you will not get a very good deal, or not a deal at all, because there is not the necessary trust. I'm not sure whether I can rely on my counterpart, or actually even be respected. So it's crucial that you actually do not go back to your hotel, and you not go have sushi with your colleagues, but you're going to spend time with your counterpart. But then, okay, what are you going to talk about? How are you going to engage? How are you going to get trust? So in the training, we will actually take people out. So we'll talk about, okay, what are we discussing about? How are we actually going to discuss? What is the kind of discussions that you have? How can you make sure that you're being respected? And how do you actually make the tension go down and become a respected person by the European? So that's the gain trust part. And then finally,
before going to final issues, I think we need to, Japanese side, European side, step forward for looking for how to building comfortable atmosphere after 9 p.m. Comfortable. Right. Because why Japanese want to go to sushi bar or want to talk with Japanese people only? Because when they are tired, okay, they want to be relaxed, right? And they want to spend 1 more hour just relaxing, speaking Japanese, so before sleep. So kind of relaxing, issues, conversation might be, considered. Otherwise, it's kind of continuing, tiring process, right? Instead of tiring process, we need to change to relaxing time, relaxing hour. Right. So this is not easy, right? So because European people want to discuss about different issues, like common sense is different. This is a major obstacle to get each other trust, right? I know that it's not easy, but Japanese side, European side need to make an effort to produce comfortable sort of happy hour, right? Right. But usually this kind of sort of time never happen, but need to make an effort. Okay, Japanese try to make an effort. This is not easy though, but we try to do that, right?
Right. Right. So that's also the objective of the European side. It's commonly understood that when you're actually going to let your hair down a little bit. That's how we mentioned it. Let your hair down. It's going to relax, kick back, have a drink or two, and talk about some things that are not so tight. That the objective is actually to release the stress and take the all the things, all the conflicts, all conflicting interests out of the air and look for common ground. That's the objective of drinking after after the negotiation that takes place. So it's indeed about relaxing and about finding, okay, so all right, so we may have different interests, but we can work it out. That's the general tendency. If people are prepared to drink with you after that, that's a good sign. That means that they want the deal.
That's right. Okay, moving to final one.
Okay. So the highest stage, the most progressed stage of this training is actually learning about yourself. And this sounds a bit strange because it's all about finding ways to understand the Europeans. But what is the definition of a leader, according to Carlos Ghosn? Actually, is a leader is somebody who's interesting. It's always an interesting person. And who is interesting? That's a person that has substance. And so the highest stage is where you get to understand yourself, where you are actually becoming aware of who am I, and being able to project that. So it's not about being top fluent in English and being completely adjusted to Europeans and acting as a European. No, we are interested in the other person, and we want this person to be interesting and person of substance, person who knows himself, who can talk not necessarily only about European culture, but also about his own culture. So if this person has an interesting story and can give interesting information about himself, about his culture, about his history, about what defines Japanese culture, then we can gain trust. So the final stage is actually getting to know yourself. Where do I come from? What is my cultural background? What defines me? Developing your own vision and ideas, and so this is where basically we are going to teach the students about Japanese spirit, from especially the pre-Meiji era, the Meiji Restoration. Japan modernized, and a lot of the cultural values were lost, especially after World War II. But the current Japanese people, they have a history that is much longer than recent history, and that defines Japanese culture, their origins, where they come from. So with this luggage, with these tools, they can gain respect from their European counterparts. They will think, oh, this is an interesting person. I can learn something. Even after 9, when I'm going to a bar and have a drink, I can learn something. I can take something away from that, and I can respect this person. So that's the highest level. So the whole training, the whole pyramid is based on, okay, your starting level, and it will bring you step by step to the highest level, where actually you as a person can gain trust from European counterpart, not by knowing who your counterpart is, by actually knowing who you are. So that's the program.